Our title of our lesson, we're on lesson number 7, and the title of it is Wisdom from Above. Wisdom. What is wisdom? Does anybody want to know? Give me a definition of wisdom. The reading is the ability to discern inner qualities and relationships, insight, good sense, a wise attitude, good judgment. Couldn't we say being able to use knowledge to the best of our ability, or to the best that we know how? It's wisdom and knowledge is two different things. There's people that can be very, and we might call it book knowledge or whatever, really intelligent in books and in knowledge, but not always do they have good wisdom, them kind of people. And then there's other people that may not be real smart in books and all, but they have a lot of good wisdom too. So, it can kind of work either way. One, it's nice to have both, but sometimes that's not the case. But wisdom is something that I don't know if you can say you really learn wisdom. You can take and see how things work out and use them to your mind and store them back in the back of your mind and use them later on. Sometimes and that is kind of a learned wisdom is what it is. But the real wisdom that God gives us is a God-giving wisdom. I know people I'll relate this to kind of the way people explain like a God-given sports ability. Being able to play baseball or being able to play football, people will say, well, that's a God-given ability because he knows how to do it. He knows how to catch a ground ball and be able to throw it over to first or to whatever base it needs to go. And it's, yes, there has to be a lot of practice done in that, but there's some kids and some players that can practice, and they still don't have the ability to be able to do it as well as other people are able to do it. And wisdom is God-given. We have to know that wisdom is a God-given thing. I think in one place it says, if you lack wisdom, what does it say? Ask of God. Ask of God if you lack wisdom. And that's one thing that is required. It's almost a necessity is for leaders, especially in the church, to have wisdom. And you take a leader that doesn't have a whole lot of wisdom, it's a very challenging position for that person. And so therefore we have to get our wisdom from God. But God appoints people to the positions that He wants us to fill. And He's faithful to give us what we need, and that includes wisdom also. Our memory verse is James 3:17. For the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to entreat, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Entreat. I looked that word up, and what I found was deal with. Easy to be dealt with. Looked up another word, partiality. I thought I kind of figured out. I think I knew what it was. Favor one above another is what the dictionary says, you know. Don't favor one another, one above the other. I think we studied that in one of the previous lessons, you know, not to show partiality to one another, but, you know, treat everybody, they're all the same. And so, you know, we're going to run into this verse a little later on then, but it's very important that we ask God for the wisdom that we need. Our emphasis is there are two types of wisdom, earthly and heavenly wisdom. And you know, there is so many people in the world that thinks that they have so much earthly wisdom. They have a lot of earthly wisdom. But what does that accomplish them? You know, yeah, it might accomplish them fame, and it might accomplish them one thing and another, but what does that accomplish them with God? Very little. Very little. What we want is the heavenly wisdom. The godly wisdom is what we want. You know, yes, it's nice to have some earthly wisdom, to know how to deal with children, how to deal with the different things that comes up each and every day. But you know, more so than anything, godly wisdom will override the earthly wisdom. If we will use godly wisdom in everything that we do, we shouldn't have a problem. You know, now I'll say a problem. Jesus had all wisdom, and Jesus had problems with worldly people. And the reason for it is the eyes of the people were earthly. And what did he tell them to do? He told them to love your enemies. Man, that's not earthly wisdom. You know, earthly wisdom is love your friends, hate your enemies, you know. But then when Jesus come by and he shows us heavenly wisdom, and he says, love your enemies, do good to them, pray for them. You know, that rubbed them wrong. That's like petting a cat backwards, you know. You know, a cat usually don't like that very well, you know. Well, that's how them people felt. What do you mean, love your enemies? They'd never been taught that before, you know. But that was the wisdom that God had for them people. And for us today is love one another. It's easy to love your friends. I mean, that's kind of natural to love your friends, and that's the way it was. You know, love your friends and hate your enemies is what it was. But you know, Jesus came and says, yeah, love your friends. Don't mean to not love your friends. Love your friends, but love your enemies also. And it just rubbed them the wrong way. Earthly and heavenly wisdom. We can obtain a lot of knowledge and even understanding. Nevertheless, if we do not put it to wise use, it can prove to be a disaster. A truly wise man gets his wisdom from God above. He keeps himself pure, obeys the words of Jesus, and behaves himself with meekness of wisdom. And you know, that's another thing. Humble and meekness with the wisdom that we have. You know, yes, we may have wisdom from God, but you know, we have to, and God will make sure that if he gives us wisdom, we have to be meek and we have to be humble, because it's nothing on us. It's nothing that we have accomplished. You know, these hands here, yeah, they might work and they might do things, but they cannot grasp a hold of the heavenly wisdom when it's on their own. It's got to be sent from God above in order for us to be able to get the heavenly wisdom that we need each and every day. And you know, we can pray for wisdom. We want more wisdom. Can we handle it? That's the question that Jesus thinks about before he doles it out to us. Can we handle it? How will we handle it? How will we use it? Will we use it to his glory, or will we use it to try and build ourselves up? You know, that's one thing. And God will dole out what we are capable of being able to use. James 3:13, we'll start our reading. And who is a wise man and endure with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his work with meekness of wisdom. Did you catch that? With meekness or with humbleness. Good conversation. Okay. We think of conversation as talking among ourselves, you know. When we talk, that's a conversation. Well, it is. The new definition of conversation is that. But the definition of the conversation here is character, is what he's talking about. He's talking about your conduct, your behavior, your character. That's the conduct. That's the conversation. The word conversation, that's the word. That's what it means in this setting here. Let him show out of a good conduct or out of a good behavior with his works, with meekness and humbleness. We are dealt with each day by God. God and us, God and me should have a relationship each day. God and you should have a relationship each day. Don't give up on a relationship. Don't skip the relationship with God. It's very important that we do not skip our relationship or look over it. We have to consider the works that we do. We have faith. If it hath not works, is dead, being alone. That's what we studied here a couple of lessons ago. Now we learn our personal conduct and behavior must hold to the highest moral standards. When we're out in the world, people are watching us. Believe it or not, they are always watching us. They see how they hear what we say, but more than anything, they see what we do. And you know, if we say one thing and do another thing, you know, that's being a hypocrite. That's exactly what it is. So therefore, we have to, what we say we expect other people to do, we better be doing it ourselves then. Now we learn, let me go back here. Now we learn our personal conduct and behavior must hold to the highest moral standards. And you know, we think moral standards. We think of different things. I mean, we can come up with all kinds of things that are good moral standards. You know, we could go around the room here and name off several things. You know, probably go through several times. But you know, if we keep in tune with God and keep our eyes on Jesus, use Him as our standard, then we will not be tripped up. We will not fail. You know, it's been, I've heard this before, that the United States has a Bureau of Standards, and they've got a measurement in there that 12 inches is a foot. And, everything is measured by that. They have an inch. They have a foot. They have a yard. They have all that, and everything's measured by according to that. Well, Jesus is our standard. And we're measured according to what Jesus doles out to us to measure up to. That's what He expects of us. If He expects us to go this far, then we better go that far. And we might look around and think, well, that's further than what so-and-so goes. Well, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. You worry about yourself, And, we might think, well, we're going further than they are. Well, maybe we're capable of going further than they are. Maybe they haven't seen the light on something like we have. And, all of this is tied to how much wisdom we have and what God has dealt out to us. It all is tied to that. Knowledge is helpful if used wisely. Like I said, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of PhDs that has a lot of book knowledge. But can they use that knowledge is the big question. How do they use that knowledge? Do they use it to their advantage, or do they use it to other people's advantage, or do they use it to God's advantage? How do they use that knowledge? Knowledge is helpful if used wisely. However, if we teach one thing and live differently, we are hypocrites, like I brought out before. Our works or our actions tell more about who we are than our words do. And that is so true. You make one little wrong move, people see that. People will see it. You don't have to say anything. People don't have to say anything. They recognize it, and they will let people know, and they will sometimes let you know. And even though they don't live up to that, if you say you live up to that, they're watching you. And so person has to be very careful. That's the reason why, when I started out, that we have to keep a constant relationship with Jesus. A wise man shows his work with meekness of wisdom, and he does. In order to be wise, in order to gain wisdom, you have to have some characteristics. You have to have some abilities, and you have to be able to handle the wisdom that God gives us, and that gives you, and that is, and I've already brought this out. It's in meekness. It's in being humble. You take somebody that is very proudful, God's not going to dole out wisdom to a person like that. He will use that wisdom wrong. He will use it against God, and that won't work. This involves a blend of humility and strength, plus firm self-control in a tender, loving manner. And that is some more traits that we have to have. Let's go to the next verse there, next few verses. But if we have bitter envyings and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Bitterness and strife in our hearts, and the wisdom that does not come down from above, in other words, in other words, it's earthly wisdom. This is what you're going to get. It's just a big mess. Sensual. I looked that word up also, and it means fleshly. Deficient in moral, spiritual interest. It's a deficiency of moral, spiritual interest, or worldly. Worldly is another word that can be used there. God's wisdom is far above man's wisdom. You know what man knows, and you can take. Okay, let's do a little illustration. Solomon was considered the most wise person in the world. You know, he had all wisdom. I mean, he had a lot of wisdom. He didn't have all wisdom, but he had a lot of wisdom. But you know, you take all the wisdom that he had, and there was a queen that even came and visited him and asked him a lot of questions. And when she returned, or when she left, she says, I had heard of the wisdom that Solomon had. And she says, after visiting with him and talking to him, the half had not been told to her what was really going on. So, you know, evidently Solomon was a very, very wise man. But you take the wisdom that he had compared to the wisdom of God, and there's no comparison. God has all wisdom. You know, our little old fleshly minds can take in a lot of things, but you know, the knowledge and the wisdom that we have in our minds it can set on a pinpoint compared to what God has. And you know, it goes to show you how wonderful and great God really is. And being able to dole out what we need, He knows. He knows what I need. He knows what you need. He knows what people in the next state needs. He knows what the people on the other side of the world needs. And wisdom is very important. Two kinds of wisdom. Wisdom from above is the one that we're studying today. Nevertheless, there is another kind. There is a false wisdom which begins with false teaching. Next comes bitter envy and strife, which results in confusion and every evil work. And you know, we've read where God is not the author of confusion. We know it is not of God because in 1 Corinthians 14 and 33, God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints. The wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, and that's found in 1 Corinthians 3 and 19. The unbelieving profess that they know God, but in works they deny Him. And you know, we see that so much of the time. People, when they die, or people when they're living even, you know, everybody feels like they're going to heaven. You know, they do. They feel like they're going to heaven. No matter how they live, it just seems like they feel like they're going to go to heaven. But you know, God knows each and every one's heart. I don't know their heart. There's people there that if I would have been a judge, I probably wouldn't have let them in. But there's people there that is not there that I probably would have let in. I'm just thankful that I'm not the judge, and I'm just thankful that God is the judge. God has all wisdom. That's what I'm getting at. The wisdom of God is more than anything else. Wisdom of the world is but what? Foolishness to God. That's all it is. God could take the wisdom of the world and just mash it up like this, and it'd be nothing. And yet people of the world thinks it's so great and so wonderful. But that's the reason why we have to trust in God. God has a purpose for each and every one of us, and the wisdom that He gives us is far beyond what anything or anyone in the world can give us. Always remember, if a man think himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. Envy and strife are not from above. In speaking of fellowship of spirit, Paul asked the Philippians to fulfill ye all love, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and of one mind. There's the key to godly wisdom there. Have joy. That ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and one mind. Love for one another. Love for one another is very important. If there's love for one another, that drives out hate. It's like when you come into a dark room at night here. You come into this church building at night, and you try. Oh yeah, I know where the aisle is here, and I've been here before. I can kind of feel my way through the church. But when you hit that light, that darkness just disappears, don't it? It's gone. Well, that's the way love is. When love hits, hate just disappears. It's like that. It's like that. Just disappears. And then you can see where you're going. Well, love, you can see where you're going then. And you know that if it's real godly love, then you'll be in one accord, you'll be of one mind. Let nothing be done through strife and vainglory. And that's another thing. Don't you see that a lot in the world today? Strife and vainglory, and glorying in their self, putting their self up. Is that showing love? That's not showing love. Love is preferring one another. But in lowliness of mind, let each esteem the other better than themselves. Paul did not depend upon excellently of speech or of wisdom, but rather in the power of God. That's what he focused on. Real good wisdom. Focus on the power of God. Let God do the power. I can speak, and I can maybe preach you under the pews, but if it isn't with the wisdom of God, what good does it do? It can cause division. It can cause strife. That's what it can do. And using the wrong wisdom, using the earthly wisdom rather than spiritual wisdom, will cause separation. And what did he say? Confusion. And God's no part of that. I want to read 1 Corinthians. He's talking about in the power of God. 1 Corinthians 2 and 1 through 8 there. And I, brethren, when I come to you, come not with excellency, I can't say that word very, very good, of speech or of wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Did you hear that? I don't want to know what the gossip is. I don't, this is what Paul's saying to the Corinthians. I don't want to know what the gossip is. I don't know what so-and-so's doing to so-and-so and this, and because there was some strife in this congregation. I don't want to know what that is. Let's just cut it out right now, and let's get to the things of God. Good wisdom. Paul's using good wisdom here. He goes on and says in verse 3, and I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. Let's see where we've come from, in other words, is what he's talking. I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. Is there wrong in that? No. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do have fears. Sometimes we do have tremblings. Sometimes we do have problems. Sometimes we do have tribulations, you know. I think we studied at one time, one of the first glory in tribulations. But you know, we have to keep our eyes focused on God. Verse 4, and my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power. Not in man's wisdom. You know, he had the ability that he could probably speak in man's wisdom and be able to get things done, get people to follow him. But that's not what he wanted. He wanted people to follow Jesus and not him. And he probably had the ability. It mentions he was a well-educated man, a guy by the name of Galileo, I think is the name of it, who was a doctor of law, had taught Paul there. And he was a renowned teacher of that time. And he probably could have been able to do that. But he said, no, I don't want to do that because that just puffs me up. And I want God to get the glory for it, he says. But in demonstration of the Spirit and in power. In verse 5, that your faith, this is what he wished, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of man, but in the power of God. I don't want you to follow me, but I want you to follow God, is what he's talking here. I don't want to get a gathering of my own. I don't want to be a God to you, but I want you to follow God. That's what he's talking about. Now, don't that show more meekness and humble humiliation than what a lot of people shows? But he says, I want it in the power of God. Howbeit, we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor of the princes of this world that come to naught. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden mystery, hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory, which none of the princes of this world knew. For had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. We, as Paul taught the Corinthians here, he says, I want you to follow God. I want you to have the wisdom of God. I don't want you to have the wisdom of man. And I'm not going to come to you with the wisdom of man, but I'm coming to you with the power of the Holy Spirit. And if I come, I think in one place he said, if I come and I put myself above you, or if I put myself, if I fall away by putting myself above you or whatever, don't follow after me, but follow after God. If I fall away, you continue, follow God. You can follow me as I follow God, but you're following God. But if I was to fall away, he said, I want you to, more or less, quit following me, but follow after God. That's what he's talking about. And Paul was one that might have been well educated, taught by this doctor of law here, but yet he depended on God. He looked to God. That's good advice for us. You know, I very much doubt that I have near the smarts that Paul had. I do not put myself as having the intelligence that Paul has. But you know, if he says, yet he depended upon God. If he depended on God, how much more do I have to depend on God? I do. I mean, all of us have to. We all have to depend on God, no matter how smart we are. There may be some people that is smarter than Paul was in book knowledge and stuff, but they still have to depend upon God if they're going to make heaven their home. James 3:17, it says there, that's our memory verse. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle. Do you see all the good attributes there? And easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. You know, this is, it says, but the wisdom that is from above is first. And it gives all these traits here. Wisdom of man and people that we work with, people that are not Christians that we work with, none of these fits their recipe for success. Have you ever noticed that? People themselves want all they can get, and they don't care who they stomp on to get there. You know, that's the mentality of people today. And it really has been probably throughout forever, you know. Is get what I can get right now and get it just as quick as I can. And if I have to tromp on somebody to get there, I'm going to do it, you know. That's the mentality of people. But you know, that's not the wisdom of God. Wisdom of God is to love one another. Be concerned about other people. That's what the wisdom of God is. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace in them that make peace. Peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall see God. Is that the way that goes? You know, how many peacemakers is there? You don't see many peacemakers anymore. You see a lot of peace breakers, but not peacemakers. And, you know, we have to get back. We have to get back to the things that Jesus taught when he was here on earth himself. Wisdom from above is very different from the wisdom of this world. Just look at the description James gives. You know, in verses 14 through 16 was the wisdom of the world. Verses 17 through 18 was the wisdom of God there. And it's a picture like this. You see this side on one side, and then on this side is just the opposite. That's what it amounts to. First, look at what is missing without partiality and without hypocrisy. Wisdom of the world, that's all you see is partiality. Oh, I like them, but I don't like this person. Hypocrisy. Oh, I live right and tromp on the person that they're trying to get over on. You know, no, that's not it. Just the absence of these two undesired qualities makes it better than worldly wisdom. However, there is much more. Look at the positive attributes. It is pure, peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good works. Together, these 8 attributes, 2 negative and 6 positive, describes godly wisdom. And you know, there's more than just those 8 attributes there. There is so much more. There is so much more that's not even mentioned in here that can be filled in, that we could fill in, that we could mention, you know. And you know, just the wonderful things that God gives to us each and every day is what is some more of the attributes that he has. Keep in mind here that this wisdom is the gift from God. It's a gift. You know, we like gifts, don't we? Christmas time, we like gifts, you know. But, you know, and God likes doling out those gifts to us. But, you know, he's not going to dole out more than what we can handle. That's the wisdom of God, that he's not going to dole out more. And He's going to dole out every bit that we deserve. We don't deserve anything, but He's going to dole out exactly the amount that He expects us to carry on with. For to one is given by the Spirit a word of wisdom. A gift is to be used by the receiver. We know that any gift that God gives is going to be a pure, full of mercy, and the like. The important thing to understand is godly wisdom is so precious and so sacred that only the pure in heart may receive it. Did you catch that? That is good wording right there. Godly wisdom is so precious and so sacred that only the pure in heart may receive it. God knows who the pure in heart is. I can, like I say, I can think that I know who the pure in heart is, but I can't see into the heart. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact. But God does, and He can see in there. See the wisdom of God? See the wisdom of God? A truly wise person will keep himself pure. And that is so very much true. Matthew 5:8 says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." That's another one of the Beatitudes. The one that I mentioned was the peacemakers. If you'll think about that, the peacemakers that's all part of wisdom. And you know, all the Beatitudes that most of the Beatitudes that Jesus gave there on the Sermon on the Mountain, you know, is good advice for each and every one of us. It is absolutely necessary. It's just not something that it's not an option. Let me put it that way. But it's what God wants us to really take into our heart. I want to look at the points to consider. How do we receive this wisdom from above? James 3:13 gave a good hint. James 1:5-8 also gave good instruction. God wants us to have wisdom, but we must have faith. We must demonstrate good conversation, conduct, and behavior. In addition, it seems reasonable that we possess the 8 attributes, which was in verse 17. They are, number 1, pure; 2, peaceful; gentle; easy to be entreated; full of mercy; full of good works. And then the 2 negative ones: without partiality, without hypocrisy. You know, if we will have that, Paul, you know, I look at that verse, or I look at those 8 attributes, and I think, you know, that demonstrates Brother Paul. You know it? He's pure. He's peaceable. You know, he did what God wanted him to do, and he was able to be able to have the wisdom that God, and be able to use the wisdom that God gives him each and every day. These qualities describe not only the gift of wisdom, but also the one who possesses the gift. Every Christian should manifest these qualities. There's some questions in the lesson book, number 4. I marked a couple of them here. In your own words, tell the difference between earthly, sensual, devilish wisdom and wisdom from above. And you know, if we will just look at verses 15 and 16, you'll see the wisdom of the world. I think it's 15, 16, yeah. And then if you'll look at verses 17 and 18, that pretty much gives you the answer to the question there. Here to here, you know, just like on the scales, you know. Worldly wisdom, godly wisdom. And you know, it tips the scales tremendously. Another question was, name the 8 attributes mentioned in wisdom from above. And I just read that in the points to consider there, just right there. We got the 6 positive ones, and then we got the 2 negative ones. And then in question number 8, envy and strife produces what two things? Envy and strife produces what two things? It is confusion. What's that? Say it louder. Every evil work. Confusion and every evil work. That ought to keep us from envy and strife altogether. Do we like being confused? I don't. I'm confused sometimes, and when I am, I don't like it, Evil work. Nobody likes evil work, So, why envy and strife? That's exactly what it produces, Wisdom will not mix with this stuff here. Now, worldly wisdom does, but godly wisdom will not mix with that. It'll be just like magnets, at the opposite ends, they push away from each other, and that's exactly what it does. It's like I said, God's wisdom, if we can only really look at God's wisdom, all we can see is just kind of a little bit on the end of a pinpoint of God's wisdom. I was trying to explain how Solomon was so wise, but yet it was just a pinpoint compared to God's wisdom. And He doles out to us what we can handle, what He expects us to handle. He'll dole out to us. All we got to do is ask. Who giveth liberally and upbraideth not. He will give it to us. But we have to be exactly what He wants us to be. We have to be able to handle that. Humility was one of them, if we'll remember. Humility, meekness, and not trying to use that. There's no way that you're going to get spiritual wisdom. There's no way we're going to get spiritual wisdom if we have any pride in our heart. It'll contradict what it does. So it's very, very important that we live according to the way God wants each and every one of us to live. Our next lesson is lesson